record. It's recording now. Okay, so welcome to the virtual walk and tour with Compassionate Compass, Marina Logan, and in Varna, Bulgaria. The first thing I want to show you with flipping the camera around is actually a bunch of tents right outside the municipality building, which is back behind me up here. This big building up here is the city hall. And these are the demonstrators who have been demonstrating for, this is the 64th day of their demonstration against the government, or basically they want to have early elections written out this year because what's going on is that Bulgaria, being like the poorest country of the European Union, basically, and the reason for it is, they say, is the corruption. That even though they get a lot of European funding for Bulgaria, but that usually ends up in the politicians' pockets. So you can see like all these signatures, and they've been here, like I said, this is the 64th day. So for over 2 months, they've been demonstrating to get to get early elections, because they say that now, as we are entering the new budget for the EU, the next 10 years is going to be decided of where the new European money is going to go. So basically, they want to make sure that the politicians who are in power are the ones that are not going to corruptly put it away into their own pockets, that money. So they have been really consistent. And when the first day when I arrived in Sofia, the capital, we went to see, my friend took me to see the demonstrators there, and it's in every major city all over Bulgaria. And actually right now the buses are back to their normal route, but when there was more of them, they actually rerouted the bus lines because they had the main street closed off. And yeah, so that's a big thing, because like my friend told me, here a pensioner, like an old age pensioner, would get 75 euros for a month, and they have to make do with that. And it's nothing, you know, teachers get 400 euros. It's really pitiful, the salaries, and it's really impossible to live off of that money. So they really want to make sure that the healthcare is better and just everything in this country. So Bulgaria geographically is in Southeast Europe, and we are like the most southeastern bit of Europe, because if you imagine the map of Europe, there's you know, Western Europe with France, Italy, Germany, Austria, etc. And then you start going east and you find Serbia, Croatia, or Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, and then Macedonia, and to the east of Albania and Serbia, and what was I going to say? Bosnia Herzegovina, that's what I wanted to say. There is Bulgaria, just south of Romania. And the big building that you can see there is actually the Archaeological Museum. And it's getting dark now, that's the trouble. The sun is going down and it's only not even 7 o'clock yet. And the Archaeological Museum. So that's where we are, in the southeastern part of Europe. And it's the Balkan Peninsula. And the Balkan Peninsula has been very important throughout history of Europe, because I don't know if you know, but for example, the First World War started in the Balkans when it was in Sarajevo, when the Austrian Crown Prince was shot. And so this is the Archaeological Museum, and I was just here yesterday, and the exhibition is superb. I mean, it's just fantastic. It turns out that this territory has been inhabited for the past 12,000 years, so by humans, settlements, because what was here is they had found early Bronze Age settlements, human settlements, and the first ever in the world processed gold was found here near Varna in a necropolis. So basically they found some graves with an incredible treasure of processed gold in it, which was about 7,000 years old. And I just couldn't believe it. It was so incredible with all the little goddess figurines and you know, the goddesses of fertility. And a lot of it was actually found under a lake, which is just around the Bay of Varna. There is a lake, and underneath the lake, there was a settlement even before the Ice Age. So that was pretty incredible. And then the Thracians, I don't even know how to say that word. The Thracians were living here, who were a very ancient culture, and they were a patriarchal culture already. And once the big migration started, and the Slavs and all the Avars and the European countries, they were just all like lots of, you can feel like tribes were just raiding and invading the territories around here. So cultures came and went. And that became to me really clear when I went out to this point, which was like a cape at, on the sea. It was called Kaliakra, which was also a very ancient fortress out on the ocean, on the Black Sea. And that also just changed hands over time, numerous times. And it was just incredible how you know, the cultures that were here, they had their golden age. Then some other raiders came, and some other people just invaded their territory, and then they all went extinct or left, abandoned their villages. And so it was pretty shocking to see all the different nations and cultures that changed over time in this area. And so because we're on the sea, it was obviously a major port and trading town. And that's what it actually, the name Varna is the Bulgarian name, but the original name for the city is called, the Greeks gave it to them, it's called Odessos. And just like Odessa in the Ukraine, Odessos is the same Greek name, and it means, in Greek, it means a place on the water. So they just founded this Greek town here and named it Odessos, and that was in the Hellenistic times. So, like I said, after all the ancient, the really ancient cultures, so the gold that was found here, they said in the museum, they said it was older than the pyramids in Egypt. So it's just pretty incredible to imagine like the ages and the years in like the magnitude of how many times, you know, humanity has lived here and thrived and then disappeared. So I feel like this is an important message for us right now, as we're kind of like almost on an extinction verge, is to see, well, you can't just go on forever, you know. Cultures do collapse, and they do like get to their own demise if they're on that path. So anyway, so Varna is the Bulgarian name for it, and it actually only became a free country from the Ottomans, because they were the last ones who were here for 500 years in 1860s, in 1865, I believe. And then it was the Russian Tsar who liberated, and his army who liberated Bulgaria from the Ottoman Empire. And so the city as it is today got its shape after that time, because they felt, like Bulgarians like to say, that under the Ottoman Empire, their country was just, how should I say this? It was kind of kept in poverty, and it was kept in submission. Well, that's what it was. It was in submission. You know, the Ottomans traded, and they let them, the people, live their own lives, but there wasn't any kind of thriving economy or community or anything. So the buildings that you see today, even the older buildings, were built after the 1860s, after the liberation from the Ottoman Empire. So the first building I wanted to show you, actually the first two buildings up here, is this big blue building. And that was the naval, there is a naval academy here. And it's the second largest port in Bulgaria, the first one being Burgas on the Black Sea. And so the Naval Academy has been a very important in the city's life after, like I said, the Ottoman liberation. So this was the first bigger building that was built here, was the officers, what's the word for it? Well, like a club, you know, like a big gentleman's club. And this was where they had the balls. And I don't know if you can see it over there, that big blue building was where they had the parties and the ballroom dances and all that. And then the big problem that they actually had at the time, because they tried to behave like Europeans, you know, after being liberated from the Ottomans. So they had like these big parties in this building, but apparently most of the naval officers were quite, well, kind of age, or of like ripe age, and their wives were really young. So when they had the big balls, they said that the lower officers, not the higher rank, but the lower officers were much younger, and it was a problem for them that they would eye the young wives of the elderly officers. So they actually built this little building next to it, the smaller one, just for the wives of the officers, so they could have their separate parties, so that they wouldn't mingle with the younger generation of unmarried officers, and just to keep the wives safe. So this building, the one with the two like bigger pyres, is the one for the wives of the officers, and the big one is for the officers themselves and for the bigger parties and balls. And then the big one, which you can't, I don't know if you can see it, is the cathedral. This was also built after 1865 in the 1880s. And this is called the Cathedral of the Dormition of the Mother of God. So we just celebrated the Assumption, the holiday of the Assumption of Mother Mary in August in the Catholic Church, but of course Orthodox calendar is different. So this is an Orthodox cathedral, and they built it to commemorate the victory over the Ottomans. And they have got a boulevard named after, it's called the Tsar the Liberator. So who would think of the Tsar, the Russian Tsar, as someone who liberates? But he did. And Bulgarians are very thankful for it. So this is the big cathedral. And yeah, it's an Orthodox church, like most of Bulgaria. It's pretty diverse, but a lot of people, because they also belonged to Eastern Roman Empire and Byzantium, and they are Orthodox, just like Russians are. And the Orthodox Church is very patriarchal. So it's based not necessarily on your diocese or your bishop, but it's kind of localized. Each bishopric, I don't even know if they call it patriarchat, like basically the patriarchy. is its own government. So they're pretty local, and they actually the Church of Varna belonged to the Patriarchy of Istanbul, of all places, right? So I don't know if you can see this part here. Is back there is called the clock tower. This is like a central point in the city, and this place is the highest point of the city itself. And I'll take you down to the main, well, like kind of the main square. And the clock tower also served as a function of watching out for fires because it's on the hill. And the traditional architecture was, of course, wood, and the city suffered fires. And so what happened then was the the fire tower, and then so we're going down to the main square. So this square was called in the Ottoman times, and they actually left the name for quite a long time, was called Musalla. And Musalla is the Turkish or the Arabic word meaning close to God, because it's the highest point in the city. And the Ottomans named it Musalla. And actually the highest mountain in Bulgaria is also called Musalla because of it, because that's what it was named under the Ottoman Empire. And this little, well, not so little, but it's kind of like a very non-characteristic building over here on the left is the old socialist era municipal building before they built the big one. And I was told that actually this was like, you know, just like in any communist country, you had like the central square where you had the tribune, and you had the politicians standing out on the balcony waving to the people, and everyone had to just, you know, come in procession. And that's what this building was functioning as. And even, for example, the first man in space, Yuri Gagarin, who went up in space in 1962, he came to Varna, and he waved from that balcony right there to the public who were processing underneath that balcony. And it's a very nondescript building, like I said, but it was the style of the 50s and the 60s in socialist countries. So there's that upstairs balcony, the tribune, where you could wave from. And this on the other side, though, this building is much more interesting. It is the opera house and grand theater of the city. And Varna is like, it feels to me like a cultural capital of Bulgaria, because it's on the coast and because it's got really good weather all year round. There is festival after festival after festival after festival. I mean, if you just look at the little things, even now, and of course COVID was really a big hit for it. They said 80% less tourists came this year than they normally do. But for example, I got to see a Hungarian film at the film festival that they had down at the other cultural center with Bulgarian subtitles, but it was amazing, you know, for me to go see a film. And they also have other festivals. It's like the little Cannes here. But the Opera House and this theater is really interesting because the way it was built, you know, everything here was like trying to catch up to Europe really quickly after the 1880s. So when they started building this theater, they said, we're going to make it the best one ever. And it was, in fact, the first theater in Europe, which had, not like in America, but in Europe, which had a turning stage mechanism. And it was finally finished in the 1920s because it was being built for a long, long time. It suffered a fire and a world war in between. And so it wasn't easy to do it. And it took, I think, 3 mayors to have it finished. but they are really proud of this. And it's called the Drama Theatre. But like I said, it's also their opera house. And so I can't wait to actually go and see a show there. So this is the main square, which was called Musala. I think now it's called Main Square. And there is an English language school called the English Academy. And there's the nice thing about this town is that because the weather is good all year round, they practically live outside. So there's like terraces and restaurants and cafes, and it's affordable even for the locals. So it's not like they're trying to milk the tourists like really hard, because I feel Bulgarians are really hospitable and friendly people. They want to help you. And so, yeah, and now we're coming down to where the tour guide who did the city tour that I went on, she said it was really difficult because under the Ottoman Empire, there was no training for architects. So they didn't have anyone that they could rely on to build the new metropolis on. So they actually had to import architects from abroad, and a lot of upcoming architects, for example, from Poland and Czech Republic, Bohemia, actually tried their luck here. So this was an international town. Even before the liberation, it was a very mixed cultural merchant town. But after the liberation, a lot of people started flocking here because it was an upcoming city, so to speak. And so the building, which is like perfect with the sun setting on it right now, we're here. It's called Hostel Musala now. It was called the Hotel Musala earlier. This one, does that remind you of anything? It is like the Bulgarian version of the New York Flatiron Building, because the mayor or the person who actually gave the assignment to the architect said, he was in New York and he said, I want a building like that right here in the center of Varna. And so the architect was like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. So I wouldn't know what it is. So the man actually sent the architect over to New York for a couple months to study the Flatiron Building. He made his drawings, he made his plans and everything. He came back and then built this building right here in the center of town. And you see a little pyre over on top of it. I don't know if you can see it, it's just way on top. And that's because there was some competition with a different architect who was building some different house. And the man who assigned the building said, well, I want mine to be higher, taller, building to be taller. So that's how the architect was able to make it just a little bit taller than that. And this house over here, this little pink one, is actually the architect's home where he lived, the person who designed this other one. And there's also a statue of him sitting on the bench right in front of his hotel and looking at his own home. So I'll just show you that one. And I just love, and this is a walking street which will take us over to the beach, but I'm going to go down a different route to show you some other stuff in the meantime. So here's our architect on the bench, and he's looking right over there at his home. And down here is another interesting thing, because like I said, this place has been inhabited by very different cultures and people. This is showing us a section of the Roman Odysseus, which was the 2nd and 3rd century of Common Era, already after Christ. So I don't know if you can see it. That's basically the road down there with some sewers, the sewer system. So that's the 2nd and the 3rd century of Common Era. So yeah, because so the Bulgarians actually didn't get here till quite late. the historians say that they count 687 is there as the founding of Bulgaria as the first kingdom. But then the medieval kingdom of Bulgaria didn't happen till the 9th and the 10th century, when the golden age was when Cyril and Method came and actually did the Cyrillic alphabet. They were here in the monasteries in Bulgaria. And but before that, it was, like I said, the people who founded this place were actually the Greeks, who gave the name Odysseus to the place. And this hotel is just incredible. It's a 5-star hotel called Hotel London. And this was also a secessionist building built around, 19, I think it was completed in 1912. Grand Hotel London, and it's just gorgeous. And it's got Art Nouveau architecture and furnishings and everything inside. But the reason I came this way was also because this building is like typical Bulgarian architecture. If you look at it, the downstairs part is made of all stone and the upstairs part is made of wood. And that's all over the country. This building is called the House of Architects because, like I said, architects were kind of a short, and this was like a meeting place for them the time. So the typical architecture of Bulgarian buildings is like this in the countryside too, because what they did was the stone kept the heat for winter, and in the mountains it does get cold, not like here on the beach. And so the stone kept the cold out. The family usually lived upstairs, and downstairs they moved when it was really cold, and also they kept the cattle downstairs as well. So the animals would move in with them for winter. And yeah, and they like to make it usually symmetrical. And it's just an interesting, now it's a restaurant and kind of like a cultural meeting place, but it's really cool the way they do it here, and with the upstairs and the downstairs. And it makes sense because the stone structure keeps the warmth, so much better. Whereas the upstairs, if it does get, warmer in the summer, that you can air that out a lot lighter feeling of it too. So yeah, where was I about the different settlers? Right. So the Greeks, basically, they came here because as the Hellenistic towns, the cities started getting bigger and they settled down. They found that Greece was too rocky of a country to feed all these people. They needed agricultural land. And so they came and settled basically all the seas that they could find, coming from the Aegean Sea and all the from all the way from Greece up the coast of the Black Sea, and all the towns that were founded were basically like polis, city governments, and they just needed to trade goods. They needed to trade farming products. And so during the Greek times, this was a really thriving society of a lot of, what's it called, masters, goldsmiths, metal workers, and also they, because it was a port, they had lots of different cultures mingling and mixing here. And so it was full of, all across the ages, it was full of people from all over the Black Sea, like Armenians, Ukrainians, Jewish people, Greeks and Turks, and so not just the nationalities, but the religions were all mixed up too. And finally, the Polish people said we need a church as well, so they built the Catholic Church over here. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, so that's the city's Catholic Church, and apparently under communism it was really run down, and so now they renovated it because it was used as a granary, and a lot of places were like that in communist countries. They did not keep up the churches because all the priests and the, like if they had monks or nuns, were exiled. So I wanted to show you, and then we're coming down into the part of town which they call the more Turkish and more mixed than the central part. But yeah, this was the place where we had, they said these were like bank buildings, so you could just see like the person riding on top of the eagle, but it's been in such bad shape that now they're renovating it. And unfortunately, Bulgaria, like I said, because of the corruption, a lot of the renovations and the reconstruction is done kind of like half-ass way. I can't say it in any better and nicer way, because what is done, for example, there is European Union funding for renovating playgrounds. And then what happens is that the playground maybe gets like 5 new toys and a new, like a rubber flooring, and then that's it, and the rest of the money just disappears. And so it's kind of made to look nicer, but it's not done up to standard, you know, not done up to speed as you could expect it in a European country. So it's an interesting way that things work here, but at the same time, you know, life thrives, life goes on. So here's this Turkish restaurant called the Orient, and this is the part where they say that a lot of the communities are still here from the older times. The Turkish and the Jewish community is still thriving here. And there's a lot of street cats and street dogs in town. I don't know if you see them. And it's the same as is in Istanbul or in other Eastern countries. I don't know, because what I've seen here is that they really are nice to street animals. So people feed them, and what I've heard about, for example, what they do in Istanbul is that the local government says that because they're social animals, there's the naval headquarters. I don't know if you can see that dome over there. That's the big naval headquarters building of the Bulgarian Navy here. So what they do is they say because it's better for the animal to be on the street among people than it is for them to be at a pound or at a shelter. So what they do in Istanbul, at least, is they collect all the street animals, they neuter them, give them the shots, then put them back on the street, because they can always find someone to feed them or to help them out. And where I'm going right now is I wanted to show you the Roman baths. So the Greeks have made this place into a really thriving society of, like I said, a merchant city. And then the Romans, after in the 2nd, 3rd century AD, they made it into an even more thriving Roman town. And it's got, I think, the 2nd or the 3rd largest Roman baths that were here in the Roman Empire. I think there's one in Germany, which is larger. And this one wasn't even used for all that long because they weren't here for that long, the Romans. So it's called the Terme, Roman Terme. And I will show you just a little bit of it. And we'll see. It had heated walls, heated floors, and incredible. Even it even had a brothel inside. That's what the museum said. That, and it was hygiene was like the big, of course, hygiene was one of the goddesses that was worshipped. Here it is. So it was discovered, like they didn't know it was here for a long time, and when they were starting to build some new buildings, they realized, oh, there's something, because the people who were here just thought that the top part existed, you know, the top that was above ground. They thought, oh, that must be some kind of city wall or some kind of building. They didn't even know it was here. And then again, some foreign archaeologists came to the country, to Varna, and said, hang on a minute, this is much bigger than we thought. And then they started the excavations, and they found this enormous, gigantic place for of the Roman baths. It was like a city within a city almost. I mean, you can see how big it is, and it's still going on. The renovations and the excavations, you know, they're still trying to see what it looked like and reconstruct the, like they have digitalized versions and plans. Oh, and here's a cat too of the Roman baths. There she is. Okay, so that was that part. And yeah, it was massive. And then, and the interesting thing was when they closed this one and the Romans were kind of moved a little bit further down towards the port, they had another bath that they used, because apparently this was more for the military settlement and the other one was for the general public. And then this was too big for them after a while, and they used the smaller one, which is closer to the seaside. So yeah, this is huge. It's just a really big, and you can see the chambers, and they, like I said, they heated the walls, they heated the floors, and it was just a whole. It was not only a place of hygiene, but also, you know, a social, very important social congregation as well. They had business meetings in here. They had all kinds of important, you know, decisions that they would do here and conduct business. And it's so fun to see how, you know, just the old and the newer part, and it looks a bit like Mediterranean with the roofs here, because of the, because they used the other what's it called, those roof tiles that the Spanish do. And there's a couple churches here, and I'm walking slower than I thought I would be, because I wanted to go back to the beach and show you the ocean as well. But it's a bit of a walk from here, so I will do that though. I wanted to. So this is an Armenian church, for example, Saint Athanas of Varna, and with the garden, and it's just really beautiful. The way I feel that this town really has a lot to offer. And then I didn't tell you that it wanted to, and in the centuries, like in the beginning of the 20th century, it was becoming really popular with Western Europeans, because it was coming up as the niece of the Black Sea, the Nizza, you know, the Riviera of the Black Sea. And so they did a lot of cultural events, and they also, like I said, found the healing waters. I don't know if I mentioned that yet, but they had thermal waters right on the beach. They found hot springs, and that was, wait, let me turn the camera around because there's not much to see here. So they found the thermal waters, and they built a culture of healing baths. So it was basically used all year round, the whole kurort. How do you say that in English? Like healing place, because it was used in the summer as the beach, and of course in the winter too. The sea air is really healing for a lot of lung diseases, and then in winter you had the thermal baths. So this was important to come, you know, for the people who were coming here to heal, that they could do it all the time. It didn't just have to be in the summer season. And like I said, with all the festivals that are going on, and all the different programs and events. For example, they have a casino, which we might be able to go by right now. There is a casino, which is a restaurant now, but that used to be the casino on the beach, and that was where they had again dances in the evenings, and the band, it turns out the one that played on the Titanic played here before they went on tour with the Titanic. They came on a tour to Varna and played at the casino here. And also the train station, the railway station, is important because this was the place where the Orient Express came before they built the railroad all the way to Istanbul. This was where the passengers got off the train, and from here they took a boat to Istanbul to get there before the railroad was finished all the way down there. So they all ended in Varna. The train station is literally near the port, and they just boarded from here. They boarded the ship and then got to Istanbul from there. So like I said, it was a big place 100 years ago. And so I just fell in love with the whole atmosphere of wellness here, that everybody feels like they just love to live. And let me get this thing over here. I'm gonna try and go. Thank you. So this is a Navy museum, and you can see an old ship and lots of different ship things and tanks. Museum of the Navy, and we're not far off from the beach. So this and also this park that I'm walking in is like the largest coastal park in Europe, basically, where they have, I don't even know how many kilometers of just park made right on the beach. So it's basically like a coastal walk, but it's because there's mountains straight up. There is, let me see where's the best way to go down. You can probably just get a glimpse of the ocean right here, but I think I'll go down this way. And so what happens is, like I said, the park was also built by a Czech architect, you know, this is the same time when New York Central Park was built, you know, the same time that the Biltmore Estates Park was planted. It was a time when when rich citizens took pride in creating parks for people to breathe in, you know, artificially planted thousands and millions of plants for the people to enjoy. And now, of course, they are these gorgeous, amazing trees. It has botanical gardens in it. It has a dolphinarium. It has kids' rides. And it's all on this beach, just like this. So that's what I mean about how people just love life here. It's and you can feel that wellness aspect just by walking around. And of course, it's easy if you think about it that the weather doesn't get cold, right? It's they say it can be 20 degrees centigrade even in New Year's Eve. So yeah, it's like it's not cold. It's just not cold here. So here we are. This is the Black Sea. Here we go. It's just so beautiful. And this is all within the city, you know. It's it just and the coastline is really, like I said, quite long. The beach itself is continuous for like 4 or 5 kilometers just here in the city of Varna, and then up, you know, up and down. There's like different coastlines everywhere in the neighboring villages as well. So here we go. There's still some action in the sand. And of course, this, you know, I can't imagine. The Black Sea is again something like, to me, it seems surreal because it is a sea and it isn't. So let me just explain that a little bit in more detail. So there you can see the port. I don't know if you can. Let me just go closer to the water. That way it's easier to show you. The port of Varna, like I said, it used to have more ferry and boats connections, but now with the virus, everything stopped. And they just wanted, there's a lighthouse over there in the end, and that's the port of Varna. It's an international port, so ships come and go from there. And then, so what is special about the Black Sea is that it didn't used to be a sea. It used to be a lake, a freshwater lake. And only when the Bosphorus exploded in Istanbul, that's when it got a connection to the world's oceans. And it was completely sweet water until then. And when the Bosphorus opened, that's when the salt water started coming in. But because it doesn't have big currents like any the other oceans do, because it doesn't have any currents, the water's not really mixing that much. So the salt content is a lot lower than any of the other oceans. And it's just an interesting fact that when you swim in it, the water feels a lot less kind of, it doesn't make your skin so dry from the salt, because it almost feels like you're swimming in a lake, but at the same time, it's a sea. So it's a bizarre sensation. And I always thought it's because of the big rivers, like the Danube Delta up in Romania, or the Russian rivers that come into it, which our guide said, yes, that's part of it. But the other part of it is that it doesn't have any big currents. So the mixing with the world's seas and oceans is not that much. So that's for today. This was the tour of Varna. Thank you so much for joining. And I am so happy to be able to share this with you guys. Mwah.